In this session, we are going to discuss about triggers, SQL Server triggers, and I can say this is a dedicated session for triggers. Let me type the same. So, what is meant by trigger first? First, we need to know and how important it is in SQL Server. Triggers are pretty important in SQL Server as if you consider it as interview perspective or work-related stuff. Triggers plays a major role, and you can expect a couple of questions from triggers too. Now, see, like if you see the definition, generally a trigger is a mechanism that is invoked when a particular action occurs on a particular table. That means, let's say I have a table, I have this table, and if I define a trigger on this table on insert, that means whenever the data is inserted into this table, the trigger will be executed. Now, let's say this is the functionality. Have written on insert of data into this table. So whenever the data, any particular record is inserted, I'm repeating, I created a trigger with this functionality, whatever the functionality is written here, on insert command of a particular table. Then whenever data is inserted into this table, then this part will be executed. Automatically, it will trigger that, and the functionality that I have given as part of the trigger body or trigger functionality will be executed. So it's kind of a mechanism. Automatically, it will be triggered whenever a particular action occurs. And if you see, each trigger will have three different parts, like name, that is name of the trigger, and action, on what action it has to be executed, like insert, update, or delete. And the third one is functionality. That means what needs to be done as part of this function, as part of this action, what needs to be done. That is the functionality one. And there is nothing much to discuss about the name part here. You know, name is nothing but it's just a unique representation of a particular object. The only thing you have to keep in mind is it accepts a max of 128 characters as part of the name. Let's say trigger underscore something blah 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 blah. No special characters. Why again it is going for special characters? Okay. The name of the trigger should be 128 characters max, or you can go for 10 characters or 5 characters. But the maximum size of a trigger name is 128 characters. And the action, if you see this action can be either DML statement or DDL statement. You know the difference between DDL and DML statements. We discussed in SQL Server basics itself. So DML statements means nothing but data manipulation language, like insert, delete, update, and so on. And the second one is DDL statement. The action can be either of these, either DML or DDL. DDL means create database or create table. That means while creating a table also you can add some functionality. If any guy is trying to create a table, you can roll back it. If that guy is not having access, if that guy is not allowed to create a table, if that guy is not a right person to access and create the data tables in the database, then you can roll back it. You can write the functionality in such a way that, okay, if this guy creates the table, roll back. So this is the action part of the trigger. And the functionality, generally it will be a batch. Batch is nothing but collection of SQL statements or a stored procedure. Both are one and the same. The batch or a stored procedure. A stored procedure is nothing but it also contains a batch, but which will be compiled only once, and you can use it for you can execute it again and again. So we will discuss about stored procedures in the next session. Here, the functionality it's like a collection of any SQL statements, like you can use insert statements, select statements, delete statements, and so on. So if you observe here, based on this action, we can say we have two different types of triggers. One is, this is high level part, DML triggers. Another one is DDL triggers, right? Now let's see the schema, or let's see, before that, let's see the syntax of these triggers, how these DML triggers, and let's discuss about DML triggers first, and then we will jump into DDL triggers. In short, the DML triggers are nothing but the triggers that are defined on any action that relates to the DML part, that is data manipulation, like insert, delete, and update. Now let's jump back to the SQL Server basic session. I want to bring out one point. We discussed about the differences between delete and truncate, right? At that time, I specified some 4 to 5 points, and I told you that in future we may come across more. When we discuss about the particular concept, I will explain you the difference. Now, here comes one difference. Truncate cannot be used as part of DML trigger, or it cannot be used as an action of trigger, whereas delete can be used. That means when a record is deleted from a table, you can initiate, you can execute the trigger, you can trigger the trigger. Okay, but on truncate, you can't set a trigger. So this is one important difference. So truncate does not allow triggers, whereas delete, you can go for triggers. Now let's see the syntax. Syntax is just like the remaining things. Create trigger, and if you want to have any schema name, we already discussed about schemas. If you can add a schema, that is not mandatory. If you don't define any schema, it will go for DBO schema. That means database object schema dot trigger name. This is fine. On what you want to give, table, or you can give view. That means you can define a trigger on table data or view. On table or view. We will discuss when we can go for table and when we can go for view. And here you have to specify what type of trigger it is again. Let's say you have two different, that is after or instead of trigger. Then you have to specify the action. As the functionality. So this is the basic syntax of a trigger. And if you observe, it is a pretty straightforward one. You are clear about most of these things here, right? And if you see the schema, you are pretty clear. The schema name, you can define one schema name and place all the objects under the schema, like all the triggers into one schema. Let's say you have you created 10 triggers. You have to create 10 triggers, and all these 10 triggers belongs to HR related stuff. Then you can create one schema called HR and make use of create trigger HR dot the trigger name. So it will be easy to access, and everything will be under one HUD. All the objects that you are adding to the schema HR will be one HUD. You can add tables, you can add stored procedures, you can add views, you can add triggers, everything to the schema. Schema is a generalized one, okay? And the trigger name talks about what is the trigger name you want to give for this particular trigger. On table or view option will say what is the table on which you want to define this particular trigger or view. The next one is after or instead of, or you can also give for. Even this one is there. For and after both are one and the same. It's just different keywords. You can go for any one thing. Both will work in a same fashion. And the other one is instead of. There are two types of triggers. One is after triggers and another one is instead of triggers. At high level, you have two triggers, that is DML triggers and DDL triggers. Once you drill down to next level, that is if you look into DML triggers, you have two types. One is after triggers and another one is instead of triggers. Here you have to specify the action like insert, update or delete as provide the functionality. So under DML triggers, I can say I have after trigger, or I can name it as for also. Both are same. And the next one is instead of. So this is the place where people get confused. Most of the interviews can explain what are the different types of triggers. People, they might have read, okay, triggers are of two types, that is DML triggers and DDL triggers in one book, and in another book triggers are of two types, that is after triggers and instead of triggers in another book. So which one they have to go for? As they don't have working knowledge, they can't explain right properly. So this is the difference between DML triggers, DDL triggers, and after triggers and instead of triggers. And a person who can create a trigger on a table is normally the person who creates the object or the database owner. The role of the user should be pretty clear for creating the triggers. Like a database owner, that means who has complete ownership on the database, or data definition language administrators, that means who can create tables. These are the different roles that are available, like database owner, DDL administrators. Only these guys can create triggers, or the person who created the table. If a person created the table, that means he has DDL permissions, DDL administrator. So a person who created the table, or DDL administrator, or database owner can create a trigger on a particular table. Generally, for other objects like tables, stored procedures, you can transfer the permissions like from one guy to another guy. But here it is not like that. It is fixed, like only DDL administrators or database owners, or the owner of the table can create a trigger on any specified table. And this is not an important interview question. Just to give you a knowledge, I just explain you who can create a table. And now let's see how to modify the table. Sorry, extremely sorry. Modify trigger. I'm used the word table many times, so I'm getting only table from now. So Transact SQL supports modifying the triggers and also dropping the triggers. How to modify it? Just alter trigger. We work right. I mean, instead of create trigger, it will be alter trigger. Let's say I'll copy the same. Alter trigger. Schema.trigger name on table or view. If you want to change some functionality, you can modify the functionality of the trigger. I think the spelling is wrong. This is correct. Okay, this is how you can alter the triggers, and you can delete the triggers also, or you can drop the triggers with the syntax drop trigger schema dot trigger name. So this is how you can either create a trigger, the syntax for creating the trigger, and syntax for modifying the trigger, and syntax for deleting the trigger. Now, before going to the examples for all this stuff, that is instead of, after triggers and instead of triggers, under DML triggers, we need to know about two tables, also two tables that are present in SQL Server, which is not known to many, and it's always good to have an idea on this, and you can expect questions on this. I faced questions on this when I've given interview to a couple of companies, so I'm explaining it here. That those two tables are deleted table and inserted table, also called as magic tables. So there are two special types of tables, deleted and another one is inserted, also called as magic tables. So what are these magic tables? What is this deleted table and what is this inserted table, and what is the use of this? Where this can be used and why I'm explaining as part of this triggers. So let me clear out all these questions. So deleted table and inserted table, generally whenever you are creating a trigger, you will specify the action, right? You'll specify the action. The action can be either insert or update or delete. Any one of these three, right? Now, whenever any action is specified, let's say you specified inserted action on a table, and you inserted one record into the table. Then this virtual table will be created. This virtual inserted table will be created. First, the data will be inserted into this inserted table. Okay, and then it will check the trigger functionality, whether it is something, and it will apply the trigger functionality, and it will load the data into the main table. So these deleted and inserted are the virtual tables which will be used at the time of inserting the data which is having, inserting or modifying or deleting the data which is having, or on into a table on which a trigger is defined. So first it will be inserted into the virtual tables. Any one of these virtual tables depends on the action. If it is inserted, it will be inserted table. If it is delete action, then the deleted table will be having the data. The deleted virtual table will be created and the data will be pushed into the deleted table. Why we need this? So if you want to add some functionality, like let's say for a trigger, if you want to add some functionality on insert, let's say the action is insert. So you want to make some changes. You want to make use of the data that is inserted. Last inserted, you can't get that in a table, right? That's a big headache getting from data from. So what this trigger will, trigger will do is it will create the virtual table and it will insert the data and into the inserted table, and this inserted table will be used in your trigger functionality. And for insert action, you are using inserted table, and for delete action, you are using deleted table. What is the use of, what you are going to use for update? Update means, what is meant by update? I'm modifying some value, some record value, or some column value, right? So what it will do is, first it will delete the existing record, and then it will insert the new record with the new value. So it will make use of both deleted as well as inserted virtual table. So these two tables are very important. Magic table, call it as magic tables. Magic tables are nothing but deleted and inserted tables, which are virtual and which will be used in the time of triggering. If there is any functionality, trigger functionality is present on a table, then these deleted and inserted tables will be created based on the action. If it is insert action, then inserted table will be created. If it is delete action, deleted table will be created. And if it is update action, both deleted and inserted table will be created, and the data will be pushed into that so that the data can be used in the trigger functionality. To make it short, deleted contains copies of rows that are deleted from the trigger table. So let's say I have created a delete trigger on a table XYZ. What are the records that are deleted will be copied to the deleted table. And in the same way, inserted contains copies of the rows that are inserted into the trigger table, the table which is triggering the particular functionality. And if you see the structure of these two tables, I told you these are virtual tables, and whenever a trigger is executed, these virtual tables will be created. So the structure of these two tables will be exactly same as the table on which we define the trigger. Okay, it's equivalent to the triggered table. You have to keep these points in mind as far as these virtual tables, that is magic tables, are concerned. Now, fine, we are good to go with a couple of examples. And in all the examples, most of the examples will be using these magic tables. That's why I explained it here. Now let's see where we use these triggers. There are two types of triggers. One is for after triggers and another one is instead of triggers under DML triggers. Now let's see where we use these after triggers. The first and foremost use for this after triggers is audit purpose. So I think I'm jumping it. After triggers, first of all, I've not explained what is meant by after trigger and what is meant by instead of trigger. Let's discuss a little bit about after trigger and instead of trigger. Then we can jump into where we use these particular types of triggers. First, let's say after triggers. This is my table. Okay, this is my table, and I created a insert trigger in after and action is insert on this table. Let's assume, and I have added some functionality here. So what this after triggers will do is, after triggers, first it will complete the action, that is whatever it is, insert or delete. If it is insert, first it will insert the data, and then it will come here, it will be executed. This part will be executed after the particular query or particular action is completed, like insert or delete or update. Okay, and if it is delete, first the data will be deleted here, and then it will jump into this guy. So the action will be completed first on the table, whether it is insert or delete or something, update. After that, it will come here and it will execute this particular functionality. That is why the name after trigger. So after trigger means the functionality will be executed after the particular action is completed on the main table or trigger table. Now, if you see the instead of table, the name itself is saying instead of. Don't do this action first. Instead of the action, do this functionality. Whatever the functionality you have given as part of the trigger will be executed instead of the action that has to be taken. If I insert a record, it won't insert the record. It will trigger the trigger and the functionality will be executed. But after trigger is not like that. First it will insert the record and then it will go to the functionality. After trigger will do both the jobs, whereas instead of inserting the record, go and execute the functionality. Or instead of deleting the record, go and execute the functionality. So this is the difference between after and instead of triggers. There are two types of triggers, right? Now, let's see where we use these triggers. Let me take this pen out. After triggers, let's go for this. The first and foremost use is audit purpose. So while auditing purpose, see there will be so many tables in which the data is pretty sensitive. Sensitive in the sense nobody should be should change the data in a table, or changes should be done with you should be careful while making the changes to the data, and all the changes should be tracked. In most of the companies, developers, they'll delete the data by mistake, or they will insert the data by mistake, and then they will say, I didn't delete it. If it is very important data and the guy deleted is not known, or if you don't know who is inserting the data, who is modifying the data, and who is deleting the data, then you are on soup. So this audit purpose, in the sense you can maintain who deleted the data, who inserted the data, and who modified the data. So that is the first purpose of after triggers. Let's see an example for that. Before going to the example of this, there are a couple of other ways you can use in SQL Server to achieve the same, that is the auditing part. The first one we are discussing is triggers. Using triggers, you can have this auditing data. And the second one is using change data capture, CDC. This has become very important interview question these days. I don't know why people are on behind this particular topic. This is not of high priority, or this is the thing that has to be taken care by DBS in most of the cases. But developers are getting this question most frequently. Most of my students complain, sir, you didn't explain me about CDC. So let me add some couple of points here. What is meant by CDC? CDC stands for change data capture. It is used to make or capture all the changes that are happening on a particular table or a particular database. So you can capture all the changes. What are the changes that are being done on a particular table? You can capture it. What it will do is, first you have to enable it. You have to enable the CDC. So to enable the CDC, you have to execute a system stored procedure, that is SP underscore CDC underscore, it is enable DB. So if you execute this particular stored procedure will enable the CDC option in your computer for this particular database, the database that is pointing here. So if you see MSBI, it will enable the change data capture option for this database. Now I enable the CDC for this particular database. And to determine the same whether the CDC is enabled for this particular database or not, you can make use of the table sys databases. Select star from it will be like sys databases, sys dot or sys databases. I think sys dot databases. If you execute this, it will give you the information about the different databases that are present. Let's go to this particular database, MSBI, and you can see some option like CDC something blah blah blah. Auto string state is standby shutdown. Supplement logging is isolation state. Read committed snapshot on. We discussed about read committed snapshot, right? Here it is. Snapshot isolation state. Here it is. Whether you on it or off it for a particular database. And is auto creates on. Where is that CDC? Let's search for that CDC now. The chaining parameterized distributor, something broker, reuse, wait, date. See, is CDC enabled? This is the option. You can see the option here. For this particular database, it is 1, and for the remaining databases, it is 0. That means I enable CDC, that is change data capture, only for this particular database. And whenever you are making use of the CDC option, make sure your agent is running. SQL Server agent should be running. See, now it is stopped, right? You can see the stop icon. You should be running. So you can start the SQL Server agent even from here. So let me start the SQL Server agent service. It is starting. You have to make sure that this is running or not. Now it is still in the process of triggering. And now how to set the CDC for a table? I have never tried this, but I've read it somewhere. Sys dot there is tables stored buzzer sp underscore cdc underscore, I think it's enable table, cd underscore enable table. See, instead of db I'm enabling for table. The first one is you have to give schema. You can see the first parameter is schema, the second parameter is source name, and third parameter is role. So you have to specify all these parameters. Let me take only a couple of parameters. The first one is source schema. SOURC underscore schema. I know source schema is DBO. I'll give it as DBO. And the second parameter is source name. Source name is equal to, I have to give the table name on which table I want to capture. I want to enable this particular CDC option. Let me go for some table in this particular database. I'm accessing MSBI database. I'll go for employee underscore info. Done. And remaining parameters are not of high priority. Let me execute this and see whether it works or not. Procedure or function expects a parameter role. It needs the role parameter also. Let me give that comma @ role underscore name, that is the parameter name, is equal to what role I have. I have to check that. DB owner. I don't know whether it is there or not. Let me check that. It is executing. It started successfully. CDC MSBI capture started successfully. This is the role name we have to pass, and this is the table on which I have done this job. Now let's see what will happen if I insert some records into this particular table. Insert into employee underscore info values I think ID is there, is the first column. ID is 10. Name is baby. And the city is Vijayawada. State is AP. And country is India. This is one record. Let me insert this. And I'll insert one more record. Chubby. Let's say Texas. USA. USA. So, if you observe, I inserted two records into the table on which I activated the CDC. I enabled the CDC option, that means change data capture option. Now let's see where it will be stored. Let me execute a select statement. Select start from. There is a function for the CDC dot. I forgot the name. Sorry. This dot function underscore CDC underscore get underscore mean underscore LSN. I don't remember it yet, the exact table name. Just a second. Let me check that. I mean, I never worked on it. Just a second. When I was going through the CDC, I have written it somewhere in the book. So I take the help of the book now. And I don't remember this to be open. And I copied it from the book. And you can see this is how you have to provide. And if you observe here, whenever the CDC is created, a virtual table will be created with the same table name and the DBO, the schema. The schema of this table is DBO. And you can see a function is there already to call this particular data, and it has to two parameters has to be passed. One is the minimum value and another one is the maximum value, and you're pulling all the records. So just keep in mind how to retrieve the data, and you can see two records are inserted. You can see the data here. These are the two records. Two changes in the data happen after I activated the CDC part, change data capture part. So this is how you can make use of the CDC option to capture the changes or to audit the data, right? This is called auditing, having the data, tracking the changes. Tracking the changes that are being happening on a particular table or particular database is called auditing. So you can use CDC as one option to audit the same. So let me cut it short. Okay, the CDC, to enable the CDC, you have to execute the stored procedure. sys underscore sp underscore sys.sp underscore CDC underscore enable underscore DB, and then you can check it whether it is enabled or not, and then you can enable the CDC option for a particular table by using the stored procedure, that is sp underscore CDC underscore enable table. And after that, try to insert the data or whatever the two things you will do. For example, if you delete the data from this table, delete from employee info where employee ID is equal to 10. Let's see what it is gonna return. I'm deleting two records. There are 4 records, and I deleted all the 4 records. And you can see these 4 records. Operation will say that operation 2 might be insert. Operation 1 is delete. I deleted these 4 records now. So this is how you can capture, you can maintain the audit information. Now, if you jump back, we can do the same using triggers. After triggers, basically. Okay. Generally, why you need this auditing information? Why only after using the after triggers? Instead of triggers, will not apply the action, will not insert or will not delete. So what you are going to audit there? Nothing, right? So that is why the auditing is used for auditing purpose. We will use after triggers. After means after inserting or after deleting, after updating. If you capture the audit, that makes sense. If you use for instead of triggers, people will laugh at you. You are not inserting the record and you are not updating or you are not deleting the data. What you are going to audit here? So this example is only for after triggers, that is making use of after trigger to enable the auditing part. Now let's see how to do auditing using triggers. Select star from employee underscore info. Let's say this is our table and this has 5 records, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records. Let's say whenever the name is updated, you want to audit it, or whenever the name is modified, you want to capture that information. Okay. To capture the same information, I need one more table. So let me create the table first. Create table. Let's say employee underscore info underscore audit is the table name, and I'm maintaining employee ID similar to that. Fine. And then I'm maintaining old name varchar of 100. Old name, the old name of that is present before updating, and I'm taking new name. New underscore name varchar of 100. So I just want to capture these 3 guys, let's say. And if you want to maintain who is the username, who is the user that has modified this particular record, and if you also want to maintain when he has made the change, let's say date, I'll go for date time. These are the 5 columns I'm taking in to capture the audit. There is comma missing. So observe it very carefully. I'm going for an example for after trigger. So fine. This is created. Now let me create a trigger. Create trigger. I'll name the trigger. I'll give the name as employee underscore info underscore audit underscore trigger. Okay. On what table? Employee underscore info. I want to create the trigger on this particular table after. I want to specify the action. Is it insert or is it update or is it delete? I want to go for update. As here I am writing the functionality. I'm checking if update. What is the column you're looking for? Let's say employee name. This is present in this particular table. So on updating of this particular column, if you don't specify anything, then it will check for all the updates. Whatever the things it updates, it will come and do the job. So it's not employee name, it's a name. So on update of this particular name, then do this job. This is the functionality I'm going to write here. Now you understood the syntax, right? Create trigger name on what is the table or view. Yeah, I said, right? Create table or view. I specified the table name, and then is it after trigger or instead of trigger? I specified after trigger on what action? It is on update action. As if update of name happens, then do this. Okay. I have to get the old value and new value, right? I'm declaring a variable at the rate old value, and I'll name it. I'll give the data type as varchar of 100, and I'll declare one more variable for new to hold the new value. So that is also again varchar of 100. Okay, now I define 2 variables to hold the old value and new value, and you want to maintain employee ID also, right? So you can define one more for holding employee ID. Employee ID, this is an integer data type. Now select at the rate of old. I'm selecting some value to the old parameter. What is the value? I'm taking the value from deleted table. So it is already deleted, right? From that deleted table, I'll get the old value. What I told you, whenever I'm updating the changes, first the deleted will be in, the record will be deleted and will be pushed to the deleted table. A new record will be inserted and it will be pushed to the inserted table. Now from the deleted table, I'll get old value, and from the inserted table, I'll get new value, new name, whatever the name we are giving using, that is from inserted table. Now I got both the records, and I can get the remaining one from either deleted or inserted. Why? Because that is primary key and it won't be changed. I'm not checking for that condition. So I'll go for employee ID as a select employee ID from either deleted or inserted. Both will have the same value, right? Now nothing else to do. Insert into employee underscore info underscore audit underscore the table what we created. What is the table name which we created now? Employee underscore info underscore audit. Values will be, the first value will be the project, employee ID. So I have to pass this employee ID, whatever the employee ID that is modified with the change. And the next one is old value. And the third one is new value. And what else they want? They want username, right? There are some functions which we can get by using which we can get the username, and the other function get date to get the timestamp. So let's check the columns once. Old value, new value, username, and date time. If you see, this is employee ID, old value, new value, username, and get date. If let me explain this functionality and the trigger what I've created now. I created an after trigger on this table employee info after update action, and it is checking whether the name is updated or not. If yes, then it will come in. It will declare three different variables to hold old value, new value, and the employee ID. And old value it is getting from the deleted table, new value from the inserted table, and employee ID from either deleted or inserted, both will do, and then inserting the data into the particular table. So this is a trigger. Let's execute this. The trigger executed successfully. Now what will happen? Let me try to update the data, any particular record. Let's see what data is present in this particular table first. And I'm updating this guy's name, Rupam. I'll make it as a Rupesh Babu. Update employee underscore info, set name is equal to Rupesh Babu, where employee ID is equal to 6. So if I execute this table, first it will be updated and then the trigger will be triggered. The trigger will be triggered, and let's see what happened to this particular table now. And trigger will execute the functionality, right? Select star from. You can see employee ID 6 is the one which is updated, and Rupam is the old value, Rupesh Babu is the new value, and the date at which, and who is the user that created. I logged in with the DBO user. So DBO user has made the change. So this is how you can make the audit. You can prepare the audit. This is a fantastic option to provide security to a table or to track who has made the changes. And this is a simple example for after trigger. And in the same way, you can go for insert also. The same functionality, whoever inserted. If insert, you don't need to specify for this insert. Automatically it will take, and here insert. Okay, I'm creating a trigger. Whenever it is creating, you won't get this old and new, right? You won't get this kind of data. Only for updated you will use this deleted or inserted one. Or if it is insert, you can have some functionality here, different functionality. What you want to do after inserting the table data into this particular table. So this is how you can make use of deleted tables and inserted tables. And after trigger, after with update action to store the audit of any table. And another use of this after triggers is applying business rules. For example, if you insert one record into a particular table, you have to do some functionality. Or if you update one record in a particular table, then you have to do some functionality. That's the business requirement. Let's say if business requirement says that some action or some functionality needs to be triggered after inserting the record into a particular table, then you can give it as part of the functionality of the trigger. So let's say here, I can go for some statement. If we insert one record and if I want to insert one more record or else roll back, I can roll back it after all the inserts. Let me execute this. The trigger is executed. Now let me insert the data. Somewhere we have inserted, right? Here I am inserting the data. 10 baby Vijayawada and so on. If I execute this, the transaction ended in the trigger. The batch has been aborted. So I'm sure this table will not have the data. Why? Because once it is inserted, it will trigger this particular one and it will come in. I'm just saying, don't go further, roll back it. Whatever you have inserted, just roll back. So this is, if this is a business requirement or are not allowing any records into a particular table, then you can set it like this. Or you can have it something like this. While inserting, you can go for a check. If the ID is less than 100, then only insert. If it is greater than 100, don't insert. You can have the check here. Select the ID from the inserted table. It will have that ID. And you can check. ID is greater than 100, then roll back. Less than 100, continue. So you can have some business requirements that is also possible as part of this trigger functionality. And the third one is referential integrity. You can set the referential integrity. Implement the integrity constraints. What is the integrity constraint? General integrity constraint. The general integrity constraint is foreign key. What foreign key will do? Foreign key will make sure that it will not have any orphan records. Without having a parent record, you can check and whether it has a parent or not. If it is not having parent, then it won't allow. It will throw error saying that there is no parent for this, right? That kind of checks you can do it here. So you can maintain foreign key relationship here using triggers. What is the difference then? If I have foreign key option there, why I have to go for triggers? What is the difference in using triggers than foreign key? Can you go for a guess? What is the advantage I'm going to get if I use triggers? It's not performance, it's not nothing like that. If you observe, foreign key can be set between only two columns, one primary key column and foreign key column in the second table. Here it is not like that. You can set n number of columns. Generally, primary key column can be referred as foreign key, can be set as reference column in the foreign key. But here you can refer to any column, ID, name, you can refer to many columns also. So if you want to set foreign key relationship for more than one column, make use of the trigger. So the functionality will be like this. Create trigger name on table after update or delete or insert, even insert. Okay. If updated, then check this record. You will get ID, right? Whatever the ID you are inserting from the insert table. This is present in the master table or not. You can check it. So let me write it here. Trigger functionality will be like this. Get ID from inserted table. Check this ID in master table. And if it is not present, roll back. Present, then continue. What this guy will check? This guy will check for parent record existence, right? Sorry. In the same way, whenever you are deleting a master record, then what it has to check? It has to check all the IDs are deleted in the child table or not, right? As part of the foreign key. So get ID from deleted table. Check this ID in transaction table. If present, roll back. Else, continue. So this is how you can set the functionality in order to implement foreign key relationship, that is integrity constraints in triggers. Now let's jump into instead of triggers. There is nothing much to discuss except the keyword change. The keyword will be changed from after to instead of, and in instead of triggers, instead of that action, instead of delete, instead of insert, instead of update, the functionality whatever you provide in the trigger will be executed. Let's say this is the trigger functionality, right? This is a trigger which I have used, and if I create this on employee info 1 table instead of insert, then it will execute this part instead of inserting the particular record whatever you try to insert into the table here. That is the major difference between after trigger and instead of triggers. Don't expect me to write examples for all these things, so just try it at home. And a couple of important points to discuss for this instead of triggers. First thing is, instead of triggers can be created on tables as well as on views, and you cannot create after triggers on views. So let's say you have a view and you are using only 10 columns out of 100 columns that are present in the table, right? If you use that as instead of trigger, you cannot insert the data directly, right? Only by passing only for 10 columns. So what you will do is, instead of inserting on the view, insert into the table. You can write the functionality. Let's say this is your view name, employee underscore info 1, instead of insert. So whenever any insert statement is executed on this view, it will not insert the record. Instead of that, it will come in and it will insert into the main table, employee underscore info. If employee underscore info is the base table on which the view is created, then the values will be passed with the help of inserted table. Inserted magic table is there, right? You will get all the 10 records that are 10 column values that are being passed into this table, and remaining values will be placed with the nulls. So there are certain requirements on column values that are supplied by an instead of trigger. So whenever you are using instead of trigger while passing the column values, you have to be very careful. If there is any computed column, we discussed about it. Computed column, it is a computation of existing columns and values. So you cannot pass values to that, and you cannot pass values to the identity columns, and you cannot specify columns for the timestamp data type. These three things you have to keep in mind while passing statements. Insert statements for the instead of triggers. You have to be careful. You are not allowed to pass values for identity columns, computed columns, and timestamp data type columns. Now let's see the first and last trigger. Which one to be executed first and which one to be executed last. If there are many triggers on a same table, which to be executed first, the insert trigger or last? See, there is an option to set the priority, I can say. That is store person sp underscore set trigger of order is the name, and you have to pass the parameters. Trigger name, what is the name of the trigger? You will have the trigger name, right? You have to pass the trigger name is equal to value, and you have to specify the order. Order can be set as first or last, and the remaining triggers that are present or defined on this particular table will be ordered in their own order. You can set only first or last here. If you set it to first, the first trigger that will be executed will be the one that I have given here on this particular table. If all the there are a couple of triggers on the same table and all these are conflicted with the order, then you can change it. You can change the order by using this stored procedure order. Let's say I want to set the order to first, and the third important parameter is SMTP type. Whether it's an update or insert or delete, you have to specify in the SMTP type. So this is how you can specify the order of a trigger. So this is about DML triggers, and in that after triggers and instead of triggers, I strongly recommend you guys to go back and practice with more and more examples. It's not already, it's time is running, right? And we cannot go for examples of each and every concept we discussed. And if you're pretty clear about the concept, then you're good to go. So try it at home. And DDL triggers, whenever you want to set a trigger on some DDL statement execution. DDL statements means like create database or create table or something like that. Then you can make use of the DDL triggers. And DDL triggers can be set at two levels. One is database level, another one is complete server level. In the complete server, if anyone creates a table, trigger this. Or database level, in a particular database, if anyone creates a table, then trigger this. Like that, you can set two different types of two different levels. You can set the DDL triggers, that is server level. The complete server means all the databases that are present in the server, and the second option is database, that is all the tables that are present in the particular database, whatever we specify. And this syntax is pretty different, and it is not of a high priority for us. So, and if you want me to show an example, then I can give that. Create trigger, and I can give the trigger name as test on. Here you have to specify all server or a particular database. Okay, and you have to specify execute part. Execute as who is executing it. Login underscore test. Okay, when this guy logs in for log on as, and if he tries to do anything in this server, then you can have this functionality. And this is not like a routine DML trigger. This is pretty different, and as far as developers are concerned, they need only DML triggers. Here you can have the functionality, like if the person login is login underscore test, and if the table's already crossed 1000, then don't create the table that this guy is creating, right? You can check for table count in that sys underscore tables, and then if the count is greater than 1000 or equal to 1000, then roll back, don't create any new tables, go for new database, else continue. So you can have some DDL level restrictions while creating database or creating a table. You can set these restrictions using these triggers. Generally for DDL purpose, it's very rare. Why? Because this DDL things, everything will be under the control of DBA, database administrators, who will take care of, who will restrict you. They will restrict you from creating stored voices and functions, everything. They will have the complete rights. Okay, so you don't need to worry much about the DDL triggers, and if you want, just try it at home. A simple example like restricting users from creating a table in the database or in the complete server. Okay, and there is one more type of triggers, that is CLR trigger. This is only for .NET guys, and the very rarely used one. Using .NET language, you can trigger the code. You can trigger it here on inserting of a table, and you can call the .NET part using CLR, Common Language Runtime, which is the runtime engine for .NET programming. So there is an integration between .NET and the SQL Server tables using these triggering options. Like if you are good in .NET, you can write a .NET assembly or .NET assembly, and you can call it on inserting or deleting or updating of a trigger, and we call it as CLR triggers. So you don't need to worry, this is not into limelight, and CLR triggers are not at all discussed anywhere. If they ask you about the triggers, just tell DML, DDL, and CLR, and under that I've never worked on CLR triggers. And DDL triggers, this is the definitions and use, and the DML triggers, these are the different types again in the DML triggers, that is after and instead of. If they ask you what is the difference between for and after, just tell them both are one and the same. You can use any of the keywords for implementing after triggers. And under after, you can go for insert, delete, and update, and after using instead of also, you can go for insert, delete, and update. After triggers can be set only on tables, whereas instead of triggers can be set only on tables and views. While using this instead of triggers, be careful while passing the data to the identity column and computed columns and date timestamp data type columns. So this is about triggers. Hope you understood the concepts, and I strongly recommend you guys to go and practice it again and again with more and more examples. And we will meet again in next session with a new concept. Thank you guys.